We're here to talk with you today about the huge changes that are happening across HR and education technology. And these are changes that are forever going to change how we recruit and manage talent. If you've heard words like blockchain for HR, artificial intelligence, GDPR, and privacy regulations, well, there's a link connecting all of these topics. And that is, they're all key drivers of this thing we're calling the Internet of Careers, which we're going to tell you all about today. I am joined, as you heard, by Yvette Camp, the founder of Velocity Career Labs and the Velocity Network Foundation. Yvette is an industry analyst extraordinaire and a former HR tech leader. Yvette?
Thank you, Ken, and super excited to be talking to everybody today. Listen, before we get into the details, I want to start just by sharing a couple of examples of what's happening in the market. And if Ken, you'll take us, it's interesting. What got me into this business several years ago were some of the challenges that I was hearing across the global labor market. So I've got three examples here for you. One, consider that there are over 1.6 million long-haul truckers in the United States. And they make their money by obviously moving loads from one location to another. But it's not uncommon for truckers to face anywhere from 2 to 5 days of inability to work while they're waiting for their credentials to handle that particular load to be validated. And so during that 2 to 5 days, they're not making money. The supply chain is broken. Those who were trying to ship the goods have it stuck. Those who are waiting to receive it continue to wait. And it's a real challenge in that industry. Another example is in healthcare. Patient-facing workers can't provide patient care until they've had their credentials verified, they've had their immunizations, their very current immunizations recognized and validated. Meanwhile, while we're waiting for that process to complete, which again can take 2 days, 5 days, or longer if these nurses are coming from out of state or out of country, the healthcare provider isn't getting paid. Patients are not getting served by that healthcare worker. The healthcare system in general is losing revenues. And then I guess the final third example I'll give is for refugees. And this was what actually got me into the business specifically. The case of refugees who come into country, they aren't able to bring their credentials with them. Perhaps they've had an engineering degree at university in their country, but because of what's happening, that school is closed. And so they're unable to validate that degree. I've heard cases of individuals who are working in far, far lower levels of work based on that inability to verify who they are and what their capabilities are. So there has to be a better way. And of course, there is. So over the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen a growing focus on this concept of self-sovereign identity. Now, those examples that I just gave you, those examples are hampered by what you're seeing on the left side of the screen. Data is locked up into silos in our work systems, in our education systems, government systems, etc. And trying to pull an aggregated, verifiable picture of who I am, what my experiences and skills and capabilities are, is a real challenge. And so what's been happening over the last 4 to 5 years is we've been moving into this concept of self-sovereign identity that puts me, the individual, at the center of data, and I am able to curate individual pieces of information to me. Now, the market overall for self-sovereign identity is growing significantly. It's expected to grow from a $100 million market this year to over a $1.1 billion market in just 4 more years. But the reality is that in the HR space specifically, across education and across employment, the space is also moving, is growing tremendously. And so that's where Ken and I are going to be spending our time today. We want to talk to you about what's happening, what's driving this investment, and most importantly, what does it mean for employers, for tech vendors, and for individuals? So let's talk briefly about the drivers. I think it would be an understatement to say that the world has been changing significantly, not just in the last 10 years, but of course in the last year itself. The fourth industrial revolution and now COVID-19, it's driving a frantic labor market. Skill shortages, accelerated turnover, the growth and contingent workforce and the gig economy. It's all created a lot of challenges for organizations to compete. And and organizations are spending a tremendous amount of money to try to stay ahead of the challenges and make more of the opportunity. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in smart automation, algorithms, machine learning, smart learning recommendations, et cetera. In fact, this overall market is valued at over $400 billion. The skill shortages is significant, but now with COVID, it's not just about skill shortages, it's about job shortages. And in fact, in just the last 6 months of this year, we saw a loss of over 11 million jobs. So how do we ensure that we're investing appropriately? Is technology really going to do it for us, or is there something else?
Yeah, and it turns out that there's a big challenge with achieving this digital transformation. So if digital transformation, as Yvette just described, is kind of organizations reinventing themselves to better accommodate individuals and trying to remove friction from the process. And in the process, we're betting big on things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. Just as for example, in my space of talent assessment, technology like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing is being used to replace or to supplement things that previously were exclusively human judgments. So, for example, using AI to score interview questions, for example, or to score people's resume data, or even to provide candidates and employees with better targeted development feedback. These are all applications that are live in the market right now that are using artificial intelligence. So these bets on artificial intelligence are happening to help with this digital transformation. But the problem is that AI is data intensive, to say the least, and it requires a lot of data. And if you want your AI to work, it requires good data. And the problem is in corporate HR systems, the data we have is both incomplete and shrinking. Not to mention inaccurate. So if we just think about data quality issues that we have in HR, AI algorithms that we use for recruiting, for example, are pretty heavily dependent on self-reported data. So things like skills that are listed in someone's resume or CV. Can we even trust the data that people self-report about their skills? As it turns out, no, we can't. Scientists have known for decades that resumes don't help recruiters and hiring managers make better decisions. We see correlations that are consistently close to zero using the data that are part of resumes and CVs. That is zero predictiveness of subsequent job performance. And this is widely known. 84% of employers have found lies or misrepresentations on resumes, and it's estimated by some that over 50% of all resumes have errors or omissions or misrepresentations, and not just record keeping inaccuracies, but actually trying to change people's perceptions. So we've got some quality issues. In addition, besides being inaccurate, the data in our HR systems only shows us a partial perspective or a partial point of view on the individual. So if we think about the rise of gig work and portfolio careers, people having all of these different work experiences outside of a core central long-term employer. If we also think about the increase in self-directed learning, so all of the certifications and courses and skills that people are developing outside of formal L&D programs within organizations, there's a lot of information about people and their talent that simply doesn't sit inside corporate HR systems. They're sitting in silos that are outside the organization entirely. So these data challenges, whether it's data quality, availability, and disconnectedness, these are all things that are going to inhibit our progress on digital transformation and these big bets we're making on AI, unless we can think about doing this a bit differently.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Ken, about GDPR and other regulations which say, hey, this data actually belongs to the individual. They have the right to take it with them. And if they ask, you have to remove it from your systems. So as that becomes more acceptable, more and more people ask for that, they're going to be asking for their data to be removed. And so that's going to further shrink the footprint of data. There's a final piece I want to mention here, which is about, if you'll take us to the next slide, it's about the fact that people do increasingly want to own their own career credentials. There's a lack of trust in what's happening in the consumer world. Social media accounts are being deleted. Last year in 2019, there were over 8 billion records that were hacked across 5,000 separate incidences. People are concerned about their data. And when they were surveyed, a survey of over 10,000 individuals a couple of years back, 73% of them said yes, they want to take their data with them when they leave. And why? Because over 70% of employers who were surveyed said, we're not really sure that we're managing data in a highly responsible way. So there are some real challenges with data, and more people want to own their career credentials as they move on.
So just to summarize, there's some real risks here to employers. The risks are that if we keep progressing with our current mindset and our current processes, if we believe that we know everything there is to know about the talent we have, even though the data is sitting elsewhere, and if we don't realize the impact on the experience of employees and the experience of our candidates from putting them through all of these disconnected processes, just looking for their credentials, then we've got some real risks in terms of our ability to attract and retain talent. On the individual side, again, just to bring it home, this is frustrating for anyone who's out there in the job market, who has been out there recently. I think everyone gets pretty surprised at how old-fashioned our processes really are and where all of those data disconnects come through. So if we carry on as is, continued frustrations for individuals having to reapply, resubmit the same credentials again and again and again for each application they submit. If you combine this with the lack of trust, it certainly heralds that we're in for something new, and we call that the Internet of Careers.
So let me talk specifically about what is the... So let me talk about what the Internet of Careers is. There has been, just as I mentioned earlier, there's been a tremendous amount of investment in self-sovereign digital identity specific across the workforce and the labor market providers. We're seeing dozens and dozens of initiatives that are leveraging blockchain and blockchain-based self-sovereign identity to help improve the way we exchange career credentials across the labor market. Putting ownership of data around education certifications and employment histories and skills verifications into the hands of individuals. And so what you're looking at here is just a quick sample of some of the vendors, both in the workforce labor market, but also across education and academia. Across the student spectrum, many organizations are trying to, again, put more control into the hands of those students so that they can better move into other schools or into the employment marketplace. What Velocity has been focusing on is what we call the Internet of Careers. So in the gray box that you see here, these are the vendors who are working with us today to not just focus on the employment side of the equation, or not just to focus on the education side, but to ensure an end-to-end spectrum so that individuals have agency over their data. And of course, on top of all of this, we're using a series of processes and technologies that are going to ensure that this exchange of career-related data is secure, trusted, and can be readily validated by any downstream user. Ken, did you want to talk about blockchain technology, or would you?
Yeah, thanks. I just had to get off mute. The wonders of virtual conferencing. I'm a scientist in measuring and predicting, measuring talent, predicting effectiveness outcomes for individuals and organizations. And anytime we have a huge new technology, something like the internet or mobile, we have new opportunities to create better data and to make better inferences and better predictions. Blockchain is one of those technologies that seems to be the key to unlocking the future of where we're trying to go here. Blockchain provides us with a distributed data security and accessibility solution that can help enable what we're describing here as the Internet of Careers. Yvette just described there's a lot of experiments and initiatives happening right now to look at how you could use blockchain to help solve some of these problems related to credentials and sharing credentials. One of the challenges, though, is with all of those experiments, if every vendor, for example, in managing part of the ecosystem, each tries to solve it individually, there's actually a risk that either we won't get there, or that if we do, we'll have replicated a very disconnected process and some of the frustrations that we already have today. So what we're advocating here is actually a joined up industry-wide initiative to build this Internet of Careers using a blockchain technology backbone in order to solve it for everybody.
And that's exactly the case here is we don't want to replicate the data silos that we have today, right? That first image I showed of all the challenges on the front, but just simply do it on a new technology. Having, 100 different vendors with 100 different technologies, 100 different blockchain solutions will replicate that same problem. We need to think about things differently. We need to think about coming together as an industry to solve these problems. And we need to think about the mindset shift that the data isn't ours as employers or as tech vendors. The data actually belongs to individuals. And this image here that you're seeing is kind of the fundamental flow of what this new approach in sharing credentials is all about. Ultimately, the flow is that those organizations that have information about an individual will share it directly to the individual, and it will be stored in their mobile device. And in the process of sharing that information, of course, it's all managed by the employee on the individual, what they curate in their digital wallet, but they're also anchoring it to the blockchain. We know who issued the credentials. It's a validated authority. It's not just somebody's brother or sister. And it accumulates into the wallet of the individual. And at a later point in time, when that individual wants to apply for a new job, they want to transfer schools or apply for other opportunities, work or education, they control the data that's shared. They control who gets that information, how much of their data they will see, for how long they'll have access to that information. It's truly putting individuals at the center of the data. And as those downstream future employers want to validate, literally with the click of a button, they validate against a blockchain that those credentials have not expired, they haven't been hacked, they haven't been modified, they haven't been revoked. So we're really restoring trust to the process of exchanging career credentials across the labor market. Ken, if you take us to the next slide, this is the previous slide was showing you the process. This is giving you a sense of what it feels like for the individual. We're used to digital payment wallets. Many of us use Apple Pay and other digital solutions. Well, consider that your career credentials become the currency in your digital work wallet. So we are able to bring in core pieces of your identity so that we know indeed you are who you say you are. We're able to bring in those credentials from schools and employers and assessment providers and so on. You have full control of that in your mobile device. And of course, underlying all of these are the processes and protocols for backup and storage retrieval, password recovery, management, even guardianship should you be a high school student or need to have someone managing your information on your behalf. So these are the fundamentals of what we mean when we talk about moving to a self-sovereign identity.
Yep, and just, I'm sure it's been obvious throughout, but to give you a quick few benefit statements, and then we just want to give you a concluding remark. For employers, the benefits are obvious. It's removing friction, bureaucracy, and cost from talent acquisition and talent management processes. It's reducing risks and ensuring easier compliance with GDPR and other global data privacy concerns. Improving the quality of the talent data so that all of those big investments in AI can actually deliver results. And then potentially creating new talent markets, new ways to attract, recruit, and assemble teams of talent because of different mechanisms to get access to that data. For individuals, this is, I get to control who accesses my information and for how long. because my data has been pre-certified, sharing that becomes faster and easier. Things are continuously updated. It's no longer a resume that I need to manage. It's simply accepting credentials into your digital wallet and then sharing those at the appropriate time. And presumably all of this would accelerate people's access to opportunities and presumably better opportunities because of the data quality issues we talked about.
Everything we've talked about today is coming. This is real. There are many, many initiatives underway, as you saw on a previous slide. Within our own foundation, the Velocity Network Foundation, there's over 22 organizations who are actively, planning and considering what is their path forward. And we're going to see a large number of projects moving out of pilot mode into GA mode next year. And so we need to recognize that it's not a matter of if, but when this is going to hit the market. It is coming for HR very soon. We've all been hearing and listening to stories around blockchain, but the reality is it's here. And every single person will listening to this now and in the future is going to be affected, either certainly as an individual, but also as a vendor, as an employer. This is happening. This is our opportunity to embrace the changes of the future, change our mindset, and move forward on this together as an industry. Ken?
Now, if you were inspired by Yvette's call to action there, what we've actually got is some suggested next steps for you. So you can continue to get informed and go deeper on this and understand how this might start to affect your organization. We've given you some links there to reach for some of the resources at Velocity Network Foundation, as well as other blockchain and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce initiatives. We'd encourage you to talk to your vendors, your HCM talent management vendors, to ask how they're dealing with these imminent changes. And then also start to prepare your team, your organization, because as Yvette said, this is not a matter of when or of if, this is a matter of when, and it's already happening. We just want to thank you for this opportunity. Thanks, Teresa and Al and everyone at People Analytics Future of Work for putting this conference together, and of course, all of you as attendees. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Yeah, we hope you found this interesting. Thank you.
Well, thank you to both of you. This is something I'm also hugely passionate about. And during my time at SHL, we actually tried this a couple of times, I think. But it seems like now the timing is right. Things are coming together. It's almost a perfect storm of frustration and groundswell from the individuals. Also, organizations and vendors and agencies looking to finally collaborate around this, and obviously underpinned by the blockchain technology that makes all of this possible, and potentially something like COVID actually accelerating the change. We've had a couple of questions from the audience here, and one that I'm particularly keen to get your view on, which is, what is the kind of underlying taxonomy or universal candidate profile that could really underpin this?
Yeah, so the reality is that this exchange of credentials is going to depend on the development of standard schemas for everything, the different types of credentials we're tracking, right? So there is no one global, everybody has to align to a global common talent profile. We've tried that in the industry over the last 20 years and have never really gotten there, but we've gotten closer. But what it means to exchange an education record or a digital certificate, an award or a badge, versus what it means to exchange a skill and an assessment of skills. There are standards that exist and are continuing to develop around those. And the Velocity Network, and I know many others, but the Velocity Network specifically is embracing all of those standards. So bring the various requirements forward. As we find that across educational institutions, we want to exchange a a specific criteria, we will support the standard around that as well as standards around other pieces. So we're not trying to have one centralized database where everybody is exactly the same, because that's exactly the problem of the past. Hackable data under one single vendor's control. This is about the Internet of careers, and the solution should be as ubiquitous and as flexible as the Internet itself. And that's what we're striving for.
Thanks, Yvette. Anything to add to that, Ken?
Well, just that it's a hard thing. The question that was asked, it's very difficult to figure out how to bring data together and under one roof without doing what Yvette said we should avoid, which is trying to come up with one standard straw man that fits everything. I participated in a little bit of work with the foundation on the assessment data schema. And I can say, yeah, that there was a lot of labor put into making sure that this was vendor and specific taxonomy agnostic, so that the data, the structure, the technology will support, whether you call it leadership and I call it emotional intelligence. We don't need to agree any of that for this whole system to work. So it's a tricky issue, but I really like the way that Velocity Network Foundation is approaching the development of these generic data schema.
Thank you. We are out of time, unfortunately, but I think you answered the other two questions there, because they were around what are companies who are already doing digital badging, how do they join this effort, and ultimately who would own this kind of process and blockchain. For those who are listening in and would like to know more, I have posted the URL for Velocity Foundation in the live chat, and this will be made available in the PAFOW community. I thank you both so very much for making your time today to share this with our community and our audience. And I know that we've already got people talking about HR open standards and how they can help. So I'm sure this is going to create a lot more discussion and a lot more momentum towards something that is so important and so necessary. And as you said earlier, is coming. So let's embrace it.